Hi guys, it's Ruth here at Artful Stampin. So today's video is made up of speeded up filming of me doing an altered canvas. So I had this canvas lying around in my craft room for quite a while. I'd already sponged some ink on it and used some texture paste using the brick stencil from Stampin' Up. And I'd also, I think, stamped some of that music stamp on there as well in like a brown ink. So I decided to work at it by adding some brushes. So I basically been sprinkling brushes over it and then spritzing it with water and then using a brush to kind of like paint it into the cracks and all over the canvas. I also took some of the white shreddies paper that's available in the Spring Summer catalogue and spritzed that with some water and ink and dried it. So here now you see me, I've taken some flowers out of a box that I have of paper flowers. Some of them are already pre-made, a lot of things are already just cut up, but these were pre-made from years ago. And I got some texture paste and applied that to the flowers and the leaves because I wanted us to make them a little bit more grungy. And here you can see me just painting the doilies with some of the brushes as well. So they kind of ended up looking like a bluey reddy colour. And so yeah, I kept using my heat tool to dry those off. And then I spritzed the flowers with some water and then added some brusho powders to that and use my paintbrush to kind of get into the crevices. I'd missed out one of the flowers, so I added some texture to that. So I just kept adding more and more kind of brusho powder and water until I was happy with the results. So I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do with the leaves, so I added some of the blue powder to it to make them not look so green. And then I had the idea of adding some embossing powder. But before that I got my tweezers and added some shape to them. Now previously I had made a sort of funny pom-pom thing out of some old gauzy ribbon that Stampin' Up used to do, but I ended up deciding not to use that. So then I got the Versamark ink and sort of dabbed everything in that and then sprinkled the red, it's like embossing powder with glitter in it. It was around a couple of years ago, Stampin' Up had it in their catalogue, so it's a retired product, but I just thought it would be fun to use that up. So here I am just sort of embossing everything. Now I don't always recommend heating synthetic fabric as there are some fumes that do come off them, so just be careful if you ever do that. And so here I am just heating up the red embossing powder. So then I decided to put some more Versamark onto the doilies and put a combination of copper and red embossing powder on those, as I didn't want it to be just one colour. I thought it would be fun to just sort of mix up the two colours, which added quite a fun texture and interest to it. So I brought back my canvas and got the Versamark and added some Versamark to the edges, and I tried to pick up just the bricks, but you'll see, or you might see later on, that I got Versamark everywhere. I also stamped some images on there as well, and because I got Versamark in places I shouldn't have, I ended up having to brush off some of the powder so that the brickwork would actually show a bit better. So don't be afraid to do that if you get embossing powder in places you don't want it to go. Just get a soft dry brush and just brush it off. So I put gold, that was the gold embossing powder on the main part of the canvas. And then I added some extra texture paste around the edges of the canvas to just build up some texture. and someone had told me that if you add embossing powder directly to the texture paste and then start heating it, it kind of bubbles up. So this is a technique that I tried. I also added some more texture paste using the stencils to different parts of the canvas as well, just to add an extra bit of interest. So I do recommend that using the texture paste as, I guess, something to adhere the embossing powder to. You don't necessarily have to just use Versamark ink to do that. And then I put copper embossing powder over the top of that. Oh, and then I, sorry about that, I jolted my stand. So after I got the copper everywhere, I then heated that up, and you may see that there are points where it starts to bubble up. So do have a try doing this technique if you are a fan of mixed media and, I don't know, a slightly more grungy style. There's no kind of strict rules, it's just about having fun with the textures and seeing what happens. So here I am trying to arrange the flowers, and also I brought back the shreddy paper that I'd tried to get some colour onto, and at this point I think I kind of pretty much ignored the red pom-pommy thing that I'd made, because I didn't feel that it was in keeping with the other flowers. Although I think I tried to heat it up even more just to see what would happen, but I ended up not using it at all. And so here I think I'm about to put the embossing powder on the leaves and just make those look a bit more interesting. And if you do apply the Versamark after you've sort of moulded the leaves or tweezed the leaves, it's quite nice that it kind of picks up part of the the Versamark. It sort of picks it up in sort of streaks rather than flat. So, okay, so then I was dabbing the paper in the embosser powder, the shreddy paper, to try and pick up just little bits of the embossing powder. So after I heated those, I started to then put them back onto my canvas. And I used a hot glue gun to adhere all these elements together. And I sort of tore some of the doilies, well, one doily in half, and then I tore another one into 2/3, because I wanted it to sort of like curl around that flower, and then tucked another element in. Then I had some gold thread that I wanted to use. Again, retired from about a year ago. I think you could buy like cherry cobbler and a garden green and gold in a set, and I had this gold thread left over. So I started by sticking all the doilies down first and the shreddies, and I ended up getting quite stuck to the shreddies. So I got my silicone mat out, because I sometimes find it useful to use the silicone mat to put over the top of hot glue and let it cool down so that it doesn't hurt your hands, and then you're able to peel the silicone mat off, and then things have cooled down and have set. So I put lots of glue under the flowers to make sure that they're well adhered. So then I got the gold thread and I actually used my silicone mat to help me stick them in sections, as you see here. And again, it's just to protect your fingers. You can put a blob of hot glue down and then put the silicone corner, a corner of it over the top and hold it down, and it saves you hurting your fingers. And then you've got a sort of sprig of thread that you can just shove where you want it to without getting in a bit of a tangle. So then I watered down some of the white gesso and just applied that to various places just to highlight particularly the leaves and then the edges of the canvas. And then I got a cloth and then cleaned up the edges so that you could still see the shiny copper on the edges. I also tried to sort of splatter some of the white gesso over the top just to give another added texture as well. So thank you for watching my video, and I hope you've been inspired to go and make your own altered art and mixed media. And you can purchase most of the products you've seen today from artfulstampin.co.uk, where you'll also find some other inspiration. So if you like this video, please don't forget to subscribe, and hopefully I'll see you again soon. Bye!